Hey y'all, go Bears! And special shout out to Ida Sproul, floors 7 and 8. I love y'all. So as you can probably tell, I'm a freshman at UC Berkeley, and it is a tremendous honor to be speaking on the stage at Zeller Block and at TEDxBerkeley. This is in many ways a dream come true. And standing here, I just really wanted to take a moment to reflect and maybe bring you all back to a time in your childhood. So close your eyes and remember being 4 years old. Okay, you can open your eyes. Just to exercise those eyelid muscles, you know. When I was 4 years old, I remember being really into reading and writing, and I looked really cute. This is the aw moment. I'm the younger one, the cuter one. I'm joking. Sorry, Adriana. It's my sister. When I was 4 years old, I asked that inevitable question that many parents dread. I looked at my parents and I said, "Where do babies come from?" And when my aunt, growing up in China in the 60s and 70s, asked my grandparents that same question, and they told her that she was found in a garbage dump during a storm in order to protect her innocence. Contrastingly, my parents protected my self-esteem and told me, well, actually, they handed me a book called It's So Amazing, a book about eggs, sperm, birth, babies, and families. And I read it cover to cover. No lie, that book was my favorite for years until I discovered Little House on the Prairie. I was a weird kid. Or maybe not so weird. Like most other young kids, I had no shame. In the summertime, I ran around with my shirt off just like the boys. And in our backyard, my sister and our friend Katie and I would waddle around, giggling and shrieking at the top of our lungs that the bamboo sticks we were holding between our legs were our penises. Yep. Maybe the extent to which we expressed our innocent approximations of sexuality seems strange, terrifying, inappropriate. But here's what's really strange, terrifying, and inappropriate. That we are so scared of sex that we talk about this natural function of our species in a language of euphemisms and opaque gestures. I didn't speak that language as a child. When I asked where babies came from, I expected and received honesty. Openness around sexuality is a prerequisite for a society that wants to prioritize health, ditch restrictive gender roles, and embrace a culture of consent. How we talk about sex, whether in our homes, our schools, or our friend groups, has long and powerful implications. Yes, it's really hard to talk about, but that difficulty isn't innate. It's a learned behavior that comes from years of those awkward silences at the dinner table, evasive answers, or straight-up lies. And sometimes those lies come from the people we expect to be most truthful of all, our teachers. In the state of Mississippi, where according to Slate, 76% of students will have sex before they leave high school, 60% of school districts adopted purity preservation curricula. Yes, purity preservation curricula, a word political just by nature of its use of purity. And this encouraged students to do activities like unwrapping a piece of chocolate, passing it around, observing how dirty the chocolate became as a metaphor for individuals who are sexually active. These kinds of activities happen in school districts around the country, not just in the Deep South. One friend said that her school in New Jersey did the same thing with sticks of gum. Elizabeth Smart, who survived kidnapping and rape at the age of 14, said very poignantly that one-sided pro-abstinence messages hurt the survivors of rape. She said, "I thought I'm that chewed up piece of gum. Nobody re-chews a piece of gum. You throw it away. And that's how easy it is to feel you no longer have worth. Your life no longer has value." Consider who most often feels equated to the chewed up sticks of gum. Usually girls, especially young girls like me, whose bodies are already policed every day by pejoratives about our sexuality, whether expressed too much, slut, or too little, prude. We hear lines like, "A key that can open any lock is a good key, but a lock that opens for any key is a bad lock," as an explanation for why girls get called sluts when boys get called players. It's not fair, and we know it. Sex education that does nothing to reject such antiquated ideals of purity, particularly ones that fall along strictly gendered lines, doesn't deserve to be called education at all. Sex education, as flawed as this, wouldn't exist if it weren't for our complicity, though. By condemning all conversations about sexuality to that dark corner we reserve for impolite company, we accept and even perpetuate a societal vision that sees abstinence as purity and sexual activity as sin. Within this narrow vision, it doesn't matter how many books I've written, talks I've given, or classes at Berkeley I've taken. I am nothing more than an unwrapped piece of chocolate. This reflects an America still trapped in its Puritan ideals when it comes to attitudes about sex. I was lucky to grow up in a household where my parents didn't care or even think that virginity was important, something to be valued. They saw nothing worrisome about co-ed sleepovers or those artsy French movies with full frontal nudity. Yet even growing up in this fairly progressive environment, when I got to be the age of 13 or 14, I felt extremely uncomfortable admitting to the fact that I ever thought about sex. I thought that desire was the affliction of the undisciplined, as if the thoughts that entered my head when I looked at my summer camp crush were proof of my moral weakness. Shame is contagious. It's easy to catch, even in the most secular of places, schools, the media, or peers. But for all the afflictions of guilt that I acquired from those places, I found amazing cures as well. I had a health teacher senior year who didn't present a one-sided abstinence message or erase LGBTQA narratives. I read and watched awesome sex-positive feminists online or on TV. I had good friends who talked openly about their experiences and opinions, with their honesty inspiring the same in me. Some of the people up there, they taught me that masturbation was neither a dirty word nor a closely guarded secret, that slut stood for sexually liberated, unapologetic, and truthful, and that the valuation of virginity is a social construct. Most importantly, they made me realize this: that morality is not the absence of sexuality, and sexuality is not the absence of morality. I'm still searching for my definition of morality, but what I do know is this: it is immoral to deny sexual health to anyone in our society because we are too scared to answer children's questions honestly. The World Health Organization says that sexual health is not merely the absence of disease, dysfunction, or infirmity, but also requires a positive and respectful approach to sexuality and sexual relationships. At Berkeley and at other colleges around the nation, we've talked a lot about how important affirmative consent is, how we've moved beyond no means no, and that getting a clear, resounding yes from our sexual partners should be the standard, not the exception. But coming to college and learning about consent doesn't mean that we've cast off our preconceived notions and our antiquated ideals. We still talk about the walk of shame. For those of us who have ever felt ashamed to own our sexuality, how can we give clear and enthusiastic consent when we feel bad about saying yes? Or if we can't even bring the words, "Do you want to have sex?" or something similar to our lips? Shame and silence don't create consent culture. The consequences of choosing to maintain silence rather than speak openly are real and they are dire. The Department of Health and Human Services says that adolescents aged 15 to 24 account for nearly half the 20 million new cases of STDs each year. And 4 out of 10 sexually active teen girls have had an STD that can cause infertility and even death. Without honest conversations about sex and contraception coming reliably from parents, schools, or peers, young people who are deprived of a good sex education will seek out some kind of education regardless. And that may mean getting really bad sex ed, learning everything from rumors from peers or from pornography, which doesn't paint a realistic picture. Particularly if someone's viewing it at an age where they're too young to distinguish between what's exaggerated versus what's realistic, they'll go into relationships with unrealistic expectations. How you learn about sex doesn't just affect you, but also your partners. If people are educated poorly, they begin a cycle that leaves a trail of maladjustment in its wake. And likewise, if people are educated well, they can positively influence just as many people. We can start cycles of euphoria instead of tragedy, mutual communication and respect instead of fear or abuse. Better dialogue about sex, means better people, better societies, and a better world. We desperately need to break down taboos in our lives around sex, and we can start today. We can stop calling each other sluts and whores. When Tina Fey said that we should stop calling each other sluts and whores and mean girls, I think we should have listened. We can promote open conversations. We can answer children's questions with honesty. In the Daily Cal's Sex on Tuesday column, Jennifer Wong wrote, "I write for the day sex bores you, for the day we realize that sex does not make us lesser. We're taught to exalt the uncomfortably archaic value. The more private sex becomes, the more precious it is, that its position is in the bedroom and elsewhere it is repugnant smut. But the more we exile sex to the closed and cryptic doors of mystery, the less we know about ourselves." Similarly, my friend Kevin said, "We have all the answers, so why should we leave people fumbling in the dark?" We leave people fumbling because that darkness is where we hide our vulnerability. The moments with no one there behind the curtain, no team to support you, no backup. It's where acceptance and rejection affect us the most. Those moments remind us to reject pretension and acknowledge that our humanity is just a fancy word disguising the reality that we are creatures of the animal kingdom too. Creatures who live and die and feel tugged toward each other during our brief moment in the sun. I don't see that as scary. I see that as beautiful. To speak of sex is to speak of life. Maybe my curious, shameless 4-year-old self knew something innately that only my older self can put into words. There is beauty, not ugliness, and courage, not fear, to be found in the exploration of our vulnerability. The prospect of giving this talk and just saying the word sex so many times on the exalted stage of Zellerbach Hall terrified me more than the idea of sex itself. But neither should be scary, and neither should be stigmatized. Let's stop giving power to the imaginary monsters under our beds. It's time to talk about sex. Proudly, openly, and unafraid. Go Bears, thank you.